Michella Chester with D1Baseball's Aaron Fitt, Kendall Rogers. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. We're going to preview the 2023 baseball season as well as break down your preseason top 25 rankings. Let's start with the top 5. LSU comes in as number 1, got a ton of talent out of the transfer portal. Can you break down why the Tigers were a sure thing for the number 1 spot? Kendall?
Yeah, I just think when you look at LSU, Jay Johnson was really motivated during the offseason to go out and hit the portal hard. They already had a really good freshman class coming in. I think just when you look at LSU, you look at Tommy White, Dylan Cruz, Trey Morgan. That's such a strong foundation for that offense. And you look at the pitching side of things, getting Paul Skeens out of the portal, a two-way All-American, Thatcher Hurd from UCLA, Grant Taylor, Ty Floyd, both took huge steps forward in the fall. And then you look at the bullpen pieces with, Christian Little and guys like that. All of a sudden, this is a team that's very loaded on the mound, which last year, the weekend rotation was an issue. LSU fans, kind of groaned to the stands a lot last year because they used about 7 or 8 pitchers a game. I can promise you guys, you will not be using 8 pitchers a game this year. It's just a really deep pitching staff, an outstanding offense. And when you look at Tommy White, Dylan Cruz, and guys like that, I mean, this is a team that could be unstoppable, but this is also a team that everybody's gunning for them. Everybody expects them to win the national championship. And how often do we see the number 1 team actually win the national championship? Not very often. So it'll be interesting to see LSU, the first time they kind of get punched a little bit, how they react to that. Because with all the superstars, sometimes it's not so easy to handle that.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. A lot of superstars on that team. Let's go through the rest of the top 5. Aaron, you've got Tennessee, Stanford, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, a few College World Series teams from last season in that mix.
Yeah, and Tennessee, who did not get to the College World Series last year despite winning 57 games, really a historic regular season, fell just short. And they lost a lot of talent in the lineup, but I'll tell you, they've got by far the best pitching staff in the country coming back. It starts with Chase Dollander, who I think most of us believe is the best pitcher in the country. Then you've got Chase Burns, who was the National Freshman of the Year last year, and he's your number 2 starter. And Drew Beam, who was another Team USA guy this summer. I mean, that's an insane weekend rotation, and they still have nice pieces back in the bullpen as well. Camden Sewell, kind of the glue guy. I think they did a really good job remaking their lineup through the transfer portal, especially Adam Maui Ahuna from Kansas to step in at shortstop. A Griffin Merritt, who was the American Athletic Conference Player of the Year at Cincinnati, gives them some power. So, they've done a good job kind of rebuilding the lineup, but this is a team that's all about pitching. Whereas if you look at our number 3 team, Stanford, it's really a team that's built around big, scary bats. I mean, between Carter Graham and Tommy Troy and Drew Bowser, that's an incredible amount of firepower right there in the infield. You got Braden Montgomery, who's one of the most electric two-way players in the country. He can hit for power and speed and throw 100 miles an hour off the mound. This guy can do it all. And then you have a Quinn Matthews back to anchor the rotation. I think Stanford is clearly the team to beat out west this year. And then the reigning national champs, Ole Miss, a team that is back here in the top 5 at number 4 heading into the season. We love their position player group. That feels like the biggest strength, even though, once again, they lost some pieces. You can rebuild so quickly now through the portal. You bring in an Anthony Calarco from Northwestern to play first base, and an Ethan Groff from Tulane, who hit over 400 for the Green Wave last year, plays great defense in center field, can run, has some pop, and Jacob Gonzalez, one of the best players in the country, is back at shortstop. Kemp Alderman is a huge power threat that's really coming to his own. He's kind of going to take the centerpiece of that lineup and run with it, I think. So, I mean, there's a lot of pieces back in the lineup that you got to like. And Hunter Elliott, who's a College World Series hero, is still there to kind of anchor a rebuilt pitching staff. So, and you got A&M, Kendall. I mean, a team that I know you saw in the fall, another team that was in Omaha last year. They come in at number 5.
Yeah, the biggest thing for A&M is, they got a lot of guys back that they expected to get drafted. Austin Bose decided to come back. They got Ryan Targach back. Trevor Werner was a guy that they kind of waited until the very last second. Some teams made some late offers to kind of get him. He decides to come back. And he's one of those guys that, from a prospect standpoint, you could see him really rise up the charts if he can stay healthy. Staying healthy has been Trevor's issue over the last couple of years. But again, Jack Moss, you look at that lineup, just top to bottom, absolutely loaded. I think the biggest thing with A&M is can that weekend rotation take a step forward? Last year is one of those things that, they were a little bit hot and cold this year. Nathan Detmer was up in 98 in the fall. The kind of the evolution of his breaking ball is kind of the X factor for him. Can he develop a breaking ball that is A, consistent, B, dominant? I think he can. And then after that, Troy Wansing, a Purdue transfer, came in. over the summer and the fall. And then you look at Chris Cortez. For me, he's kind of that breakout candidate. He's a guy that last year pitched some very meaningful innings for A&M, was up to 98, 99 at times with his fastball. Didn't hold that, but he was up to that. He established a pretty good cutter last year. But again, developing that secondary stuff is going to be really, key for Cortez. I think when you look at the back end of the bullpen, I think Nate Yeske has some really nice pieces and guys like Will Johnston, Justin Lampkin, a freshman, who was one of the top recruits in the country for the Aggies. They're going to expect him to do some big things too. So, A&M's coming from a different point this year. Last year, they kind of snuck up on people. This year, a little bit like LSU, everybody's going to be gunning for them. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that this year.
Absolutely. How about Wake Forest? They finished not ranked at all last year in the top 25. They come in at number 6 preseason, not to mention 7 ACC teams. What do you guys see there?
Yeah, Wake Forest did have a good year last year. They took a step forward, got into a regional, which was an important step for them. And now it feels like this is their year to really make a run, and you look at those 7 ACC teams in the top 25. I think Wake is clearly the team to beat this year, which is an unusual position. They haven't really been in this position for 20 years, where they were like a top 10 team heading into the season, have to deal with those kind of expectations. But the firepower on the mound here really stands out. You've got the reigning ACC pitcher of the year in Rhett Lauder, who I think is the only guy that could really rival Chase Dolander right now as the best starting pitcher in the country. He's right there. He's mid-90s guy with a plus breaking ball and a plus changeup. It's all there, and command. And then you've got Teddy McGraw, who's another Team USA guy last year, who's coming into his own, kind of a raw Northeast kid who was hurt in high school. Took him a little while to figure it out, but it's just electric stuff. And he really kind of turned the corner in the second half last year. Josh Hartle, the left-hander, was the highest-ranked pitcher to show up on campus a year ago. Kind of struggled as a freshman, took his lumps. He's completely overhauled a lot of his mechanics and his repertoire in the offseason. We're expecting a huge jump from him. So those 3 guys, that gives you a rotation that could rival anybody. And it's lots of star power in the lineup with Nick Kurtz and Brock Wilkin on the corners. Gives you power. I think Kurtz is one of the best players in the country that maybe not that many people know about, because for a big, physical first baseman who hits home runs, he also does an incredible job controlling the strike zone, and he's an elite defender. So he's going to become a household name in college baseball very quickly.
Yeah, so 9 teams out of the SEC made the preseason top 25, 7 out of the ACC. How about the Pac-12, Big 12? Anything standing out there, Kendall?
I think the Big 12 was really interesting for me as you look at Oklahoma State and TCU as kind of those leading teams. But for me, it's kind of outside of those 2 teams. How will this conference stack up? You look at teams like Texas, who was in Omaha last year. They lost a lot of key pieces, including the Player of the Year and Ivan Melendez. They're going to be a different team, but will the results be vastly different? And that's kind of the big question mark with them. Keep an eye on Jalen Flores, Jared Thomas, 2 talented freshmen. You look at the front of the rotation. Lucas Gordon is back. I think Texas Tech, a team that barely made our top 25. I think they're a club that's really interesting. In 10 times like we trust, right? Because if you look at Texas Tech on paper, you're going, oh man, how do you rank this team? But you got to believe in Tim Tadlock. They've always had that superstar. They Josh Young. He kind of passes the torch to Jace, his younger brother. Now, who is going to become that superstar? Is it going to be Hudson White, who was one of the better players in the Big 12 last year? That's probably your safest bet. But I think Texas Tech's going to be a little different this year in the sense that on the mound, I think Mason Molina is going to have a really nice year. Brendan Gurton, if he can stay healthy, is certainly a premium arm. I've seen him up to 97 before with his fastball. And then you look at guys like Trenton Parrish, a freshman, Zane Petty. So they have a lot of nice pieces from a pitching standpoint. But, also keep an eye on Oklahoma. Oklahoma, again, national runner-up last year. People say, oh, it looks a little odd that Oklahoma is national runner-up. They're not ranked. But this is an Oklahoma team with a lot of question marks. They're expecting Jamie Hitt, the Texas Tech transfer, to come in and make an instant impact. He certainly had a really good fall. Aaron saw him really good in the fall. And then you look offensively, year 2 under Reggie Willits with guys like John Spikerman, Jackson Nicholas, Wallace Clark, and guys like that back. So you expect them to be offensive. The question mark for me is, can Kel Davis, the Oklahoma State transfer, and Jamie Hitt, can they be what they're kind of cracked up to be, so to speak? So it'll be interesting.
All right, so my favorite part of the interview, let's go through top players to watch, and then I'll have each of you make a way too early pick for Player of the Year. Aaron, you want to start?
Yeah, it's really an exciting year as usual in the SEC, and people are going to talk a lot about Dylan Cruz at LSU. That's kind of the biggest name. One of the I think maybe some of the strongest competitors for National Player of the Year might be his own teammates. Tommy White, who hit all those home runs at NC State last year, was kind of the instant folk hero. Now he's at LSU. He's going to hit a ton of home runs there and be a fan favorite. And then Paul Skeens from Air Force. I mean, this is a guy that is going to step right into this rotation and show you mid to high 90s stuff. And, he can hit for power too if they need him to. But I mean, I think clearly they need him most on the mound. And so, the couple of impact guys that they added. So, I mean, those are some of the players that I think you have to look at. I mean, we talked about some of the other ones, the Tennessee pitchers, the Stanford bats, Jacob Gonzalez at Ole Miss. But I think right now that this race is Dylan Cruz's to lose. He feels like the guy. And if I had to pick somebody, that's who I'm going to go with.
All right, Kendall, what do you think?
Well, Dylan Cruz is the safest pick. I'm going to give you two guys to keep an eye on, though. Keep an eye on Wyatt Langford at Florida. If not for Dylan Cruz and Tommy White during the offseason, Wyatt Langford may be the most kind of favorite player in the SEC. You're talking about a guy last year who kind of busted on the scene 2 years ago. It was a non-factor. Last year, busted on the scene, 355, 26 home runs, 61 RBIs for the Gators last year. If Florida is going to be that top 5 team, be that national championship type of team, Wyatt Langford is going to have a great year. I think he will. But I'm going to give you kind of a sleeper name out west in Garrett Forrester at Oregon State. You're talking about a guy who had 9 home runs, 60 RBIs last year. And how about this? 64 walks. So if you're looking for a Swiss Army knife production guy offensively, how about a 60 RBI and 60-plus walk guy in Garrett Forrester? And again, Oregon State just outside of the top 25, but if Garrett Forrester has a great year, that obviously elevates their chances of making a pretty big splash here in 2023.
And if I could throw in one more name, Michela, don't forget about Vance Honeycutt at North Carolina. I mean, he nearly went 30-30 as a true freshman. 29 stolen bases, 25 home runs. Huge year. This guy is a ridiculous superstar, and he's only going to be a sophomore now. I can't wait to see what he can do.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Last but not least, let's have each of you pick an under-the-radar team that could make a run, maybe make the College World Series this season. Kendall, you want to start?
Well, I'm hoping after my Oklahoma pick last year, I'm hoping this will pan out. But I'm going to go with UConn. I love teams, and I know this sounds a little odd, but I love teams who got to a super regional or got to a regional final and just fell a little bit short. I think that keeps them really hungry. And I think when you look at UConn last year after beating Stanford in game 1 and losing the next 2 games, I think they're going to be really hungry. And I think obviously the question mark with UConn for me is, without Pat Gallagher and Austin Peterson, how do they rebound on the mound? But again, kind of like Tim Tadlock in Texas Tech and Josh McDonald, I trust at UConn. I think Andrew Sears, Stephen Quigley are 2 impact transfers to keep an eye on. Sears up to 94 from the left side. Ian Cook is going to move in that Friday role. He's a guy that certainly has experience. And keep an eye on, David Smith and, Ben Huber from an offensive standpoint. Those are 2 guys that racked up really good numbers last year. David Smith, under one of those under the radar, most electrifying players in college baseball. Jim Penders has been knocking on the door for years. And I think this could be one of those years where they've got the personnel, they've got the want, they've got the motivation to finally get it done.
Aaron.
I think last year, Michela, when we had this conversation, I think I gave you Campbell, which, we saw Campbell held themselves very well, gave Tennessee a run for their money in the regional. Keep an eye on Campbell again this year, but I'm going to stick in the same part of the country, and I'm going to go with Charlotte this time around. This Robert Woodard, their head coach, thinks this could be the best team he's had, and they've had some good teams the last few years. There's still a lot of guys back here. You go through their lineup. I mean, Austin Knight has just been a doubles machine. He had a little bit of a down year last year. He's back for 5th season, and he's a really good player to kind of anchor that thing. Jack Dragum, another 5th-year guy at shortstop. You love to have experience at that position. Will Butcher, and how about Jake Cunningham, Cam Fisher? These are guys that have real tools, real ability, can hit for power. It's a very intimidating lineup. I think it's going to be one of the better lineups, certainly in Conference USA and maybe in all of college baseball. The key for them is whether the pitching staff holds up. You bring in Adonye Evans from Vanderbilt. That's a really important piece for them, a guy that didn't have a lot of opportunities at Vandy, but now he's going to get a chance to step right in and show what he can do. A fastball that can reach the mid-90s. If he can be that guy for them on Fridays, a real rock in the rotation, and all the pieces fall into place behind him, I could see Charlotte being that kind of Omaha sleeper.
All right,
Michaela,
I like it.
can I have one extra team? Aaron got Vance Honeycutt as an extra. Can I get an
I have
extra?
a bonus one. Go ahead. I'll give you a bonus.
Okay. Keep an eye on Florida State lean, Jared. If there was one team in the country from a talent standpoint and coaching standpoint that I could see at the end of the year, they're playing for a berth in Omaha, and it would not shock me that much is Lee Jarrett in Florida State. Because I think when you look at this team overall, obviously we saw the job that Link and his coaching staff with Rich Wallace and Chuck Ristano, what they did at Notre Dame the last few years. But, you look at Florida State this year with Wyatt Kroll in the front of the rotation. You look Carson Montgomery's a big-time arm. Jackson Ballmeister's a big-time arm. If that rotation pans out to go with that offense, that could be a really, really good team. And keep an eye on Cam Smith at the hot corner, the talented freshman. That coaching staff absolutely raves about him. So keep an eye on the Seminoles. It would not shock me if their pitching comes together, if they're one of the better teams in the ACC.
All right, half the points if your second choice does it. Just kidding. But thank you guys. Appreciate you breaking it down. Excited for a great 2023 season.